Welcome to an all-new episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by Kendra Scott. Her Playbook is a podcast highlighting inspiring stories of women in sport and business. My name is Madelyn Burke, and I am joined today by Theresa Tran. She is a veteran in the industry of communication, brand marketing, the founder of The Offense. Theresa, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Maddie.
It's so fun to have you here, and I feel like I didn't even do you justice with that explanation of what you do, because you have been around the industry for so long. Starting your career working with some big brands, Nike, Jordan, Donna Karan. How did you get into this space that you're in right now? How did you get your start?
It's a very, very unconventional path, but a path that I'm obviously very proud of, because I want other young women to see a place for themselves in this industry. How I started in the industry was really, I credit it to growing up in Portland, Oregon. I credit it to Nike's headquarters being right there in my backyard. And I credit my education. I studied marketing and international business at Portland State University. So being kind of very Portland homegrown and going to work for Nike right out of college was such a dream for me and a career aspiration. And being able to start my career in the sports business there is like the perfect degree.
Yeah.
It was the perfect place to really cut my teeth into the industry, get to know the business and the mechanics behind the industry, get to work with amazing products, amazing athletes, amazing events. And that's sort of how I started.
That's fascinating. And I'm always curious too, because you mentioned you didn't play sports growing up. A lot of people point to, well, how could you possibly know sport if you don't play sport? Which, first of all, many of us didn't play sport growing up. How did you fall in love with it? Like, where did you find that passion?
Well, it's funny because growing up, obviously in a very traditional Asian household, it was academics over athletics. Now, did I dabble in sport? Absolutely.
Yeah. I
dabbled in tennis and gymnastics. I was on dance team. I was a cheerleader. I loved to snowboard. So I certainly was, sports was not foreign in our household. We were just not playing in the sense of playing for points and standings. We didn't play in competitive environments. We didn't play in structured settings. It was just more sports as fans, which then became sports as a career for me.
And, starting in Nike, you grew a lot in that role and became an integral part of the Jordan brand's marketing and promotion throughout the years, and working with Jordan in that. How did that experience come to pass, and how did that evolve?
So I had two very distinct chapters at Nike, I want to say. My first chapter was right out of college, and I applied for a role in a very entry-level admin position. The admin position was actually in human resources at the time, which you would think, what does that have to do with marketing? But when I started my career in HR as an admin, I got to see how the company worked from a personnel standpoint. I got to see types of positions that were out there, the types of people that were hired for these positions, what kind of experience was required to be able to make yourself the right kind of candidate. And so knowing all that gave me just tremendous insights into what I wanted my career path to be. Mm-hmm. So from that admin role, I ended up getting promoted into an assistant product manager position. And then from there, a product manager position. So I got to learn everything from the inner workings of the company all the way through to how product is created. So that was tremendous education and exposure for me. So that was chapter one.
Yeah.
After about 2.5, 3 years of that time at Nike, I wanted to move to New York. So that's when I started working for Miramax Films, Donna Karan. So I sort of got all this other non-sports experience under my belt, to the point where when I came back to Nike for chapter two, that was to be head of comms for the Jordan brand. And Jordan brand, as you know, is more than a basketball brand. So I really feel at that time, all of my experiences having done Nike that first time, but also working in fashion, in entertainment, in design and automotive and tech, all these other industries really fed into what and how I could succeed in a comms role at Jordan brand.
Yeah. And describe to me what that comms role was like. I mean, you've experienced a lot in those years that you were heading up that brand. It's such an iconic brand, a brand that, you say Jordan, everyone immediately knows what we're talking about. What were some of the moments that stick out to you when you remember that time?
Oh my gosh. Comms at Jordan Brand was so diverse because on any given day, you would be doing product marketing, as in launching a new line of Jordans or a new apparel collection. And every season there was a new product coming out. You could be also doing athlete marketing. So when you sign on athletes or work with athletes, whether it was Roy Jones Jr. at the time, Carmelo Anthony, Derek Jeter. Again, Jordan was more than a basketball brand, so we had more than basketball athletes on the roster. So that was really interesting, was to be able to then go from product into athlete marketing. And then other times it's event marketing. Mm-hmm. Things like NBA All-Star Weekend, things like the Jordan Classic, things like Michael Jordan's celebrity golf tournament in the Bahamas. And then other times there's cause marketing, doing things that really connect with your consumer in the community, being very intentional with your brand in ways that give back. So every day was different, mm-hmm. and it just gave me such a full scope of how the marketing machine works within a global organization like Nike, in an industry like sport that is literally the universal language of the world.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned how the Jordan brand is so much more than basketball. It covers all sports. And it also covers a lot of different athletes, but it also zeroes back to Michael Jordan himself as an athlete. I'm so curious too, what it's like working with a guy who is, larger than life in that presence, but also has been sort of deliberate after his playing days of being, not as much in the spotlight and not as much, on press rows and things like that, and how you navigate that balance and what that unique relationship was like.
Working for somebody like him who exudes confidence and excellence every day keeps you on your toes. Yeah. And you learn so much, whether he was in the room or not. Just his essence and his presence permeated through everything that you did. We talked about things like quiet confidence. We talked about things like excellence. We talked about all these things that he stood for that really sort of translated into everything that we did. Whether he was, again, physically in the room or not, it still had to embody his values. And I still think those values, I know those values still live in me to this day. Yeah. You approach your work in a way that just keeps you very, very sharp and on point, because you kind of still have that voice in your head of what would some of these world-class athletes that I've worked with, what would they do? Yeah. Or how would they like to see this? Or how would they want it done? And when you have that type of influence in your DNA, your career DNA, it really forces you to stay on top of your game.
Yeah. And I mean, it takes a presence that just the essence of a person can demand that kind of greatness. I think it's fantastic. And I'm personally excited too with the announcement that he's going to be contributing to the NBA on NBC broadcast this year. I think that's going to bring a lot. Knowing him the way that you do, I mean, how is that going to play out?
I get to see him on TV all the time now. I mean, I was obsessed during COVID of The Last Dance, right?
Yeah, we all were.
We all were. And so imagine now being able to kind of, again, relive the sport through him, through the GOAT, is going to be incredible.
It's going to be incredible. And I love how you talked about how his influence has permeated your approach to the world of business. You pivoted from corporate America to entrepreneurship. That's a big leap to take. When you made that jump in 2006, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You made that change. How did you know that was the right move for you? And how did you have the confidence and the courage to venture off into that direction?
I don't know that I was totally sure it was the right move. I just knew that I wanted and needed to do it before time passed me by. Because we all talk about doing things before you live to regret it. Or doing things because if you don't do it, you'll live to regret it. And I felt like it was just that time in my career where I just really wanted to set myself free out into the world and to take all the marketing kind of knowledge and discipline that I had being trained by the best company in the world, Nike, and going out in the world to be able to take on clients across all genres, all sports. I loved to travel, so I wanted to use that as an opportunity to take on clients and travel the world. And I just wanted to see what was out there.
Yeah.
What was out there in ways that maybe a corporate environment wasn't able to give you that fast.
Right.
And so I did it. It was a total leap of faith. I was 33 years old at the time. And I said to myself at the time, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just get a job again.
There you go.
And it's been 18, almost 19 years, and I haven't had to look for a job because my job is my company.
Yeah.
And I want to do that for as long as I can. I also pivoted post Nike, post Jordan Brand into working with Pele, right? Which is now, I went from the GOAT of basketball to now the GOAT of soccer. And I was able to work with him for 7 years, from 2010 to 2017. And that was also an incredible experience. We traveled to 32 countries together, working with all sorts of brands from Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Volkswagen, Hublot, Emirates Airlines, the list goes on.
Wow.
And I got to see through his eyes in the most intense crash course in global football what an icon like Pele means to the world, and not just in sport, but in society. And so again, it's things like the Michael Jordan influence, the Pele influence, and all these other clients that I've had. I've had the opportunity to work for Carl Banks for many years on his G3 starter business. And when you work with people of that championship mindset, it just forces you to produce good work. You just don't want to disappoint anybody that you work with.
Yeah. It's interesting when you look at hindsight too. I think, if we look at our lives in, forward, it's one way, but when you look in the rearview mirror and look back to how you got to where you are, I see all the pieces coming together, right? The HR experience puts you in a unique position when you're starting a company to understand how to build out the people around you. The different aspects of, film and entertainment and fashion and sport have put you in such a uniquely qualified position to dabble in all of these different fields and to experience the world in such a unique way. And then also, the greatness that you mentioned that you've worked with. And while you have touched on how they have influenced your approach to it, it's also kind of fascinating to me that, have you taken a moment to realize like, wow, all of these wonderfully great, talented people have trusted me to do this because of that greatness. Like, that's got to be pretty cool.
I feel blessed every day, not just in the position and role that I have, but the opportunities and the chances that people have taken on me. I mean, I'm a solopreneur, I'm a small company with a small team with big clients, and clients don't have to choose me. There's a lot of agencies and consultants and companies out there that they can work with, but I feel like I always focused on delivering in the smallest of ways, which then all add up to the biggest of opportunities. And I always felt like I wanted to be the person that anybody could rely on, even if it was a very menial task behind the scenes. I would do that with just as much pride as something that's front and center for the public to see. And just the pride that I take in my work at any level, and still to this day, still wanting to get my hands dirty and roll up my sleeves and do whatever it takes to get things done. I feel like that mentality has always worked to my benefit. I just want to add value wherever I go in any way, whether it pays me or not. I still want to add value, because eventually there was always that saying where it's like, do what you love and the money will follow. And I always kept that in the back of my mind, because when you add the value, those things can be priceless, which then can add to a business opportunity in the end. And then I think my, growing up as an immigrant in America, the word navigate is just part of your psyche. You have to navigate leaving your birth country to a whole new place. You have to navigate growing up in a country as an immigrant. You then have to navigate being the only woman and potentially one of few women, if anything, the only Asian woman in a room or an industry full of men. And then I'm a solo traveler a lot. I love to travel the world. I've been to 102 countries, and many of those trips I've traveled on my own. And I've had to navigate some of these countries on my own. So I feel like that word navigate has also been in my mind a lot because it's just part of my operating system.
Yeah. And it's such a unique experience that you have that so many people encounter in different ways, right? Being somebody that is unlike the people around them in a room. And when you look at the experiences you've had in those moments, what are some things that you would say to your younger self, or what's something that you would want to whisper to a woman walking into a room full of men to give a meeting or a presentation to say, all right, this is how you navigate that moment?
I sort of just navigated things through letting my work speak for itself. There were often times when I'd walk into a room and I would not think about my background, my ethnicity, my gender. I just wanted to walk into a room and put my best foot forward and do the best job that I could. Mm-hmm. And when you just focus, when you're that hyper focused on the work and the outcome of your work, I feel like the respect follows.
Yeah.
And so it was just sort of naturally earned over the years.
Yeah. You mentioned 102 countries that you have traveled to. First of all, I hope you have global entry and pre-check because that is a lot of that.
I do. And I save all my hotel room keys too.
Oh my gosh.
So I suppose a sports collector would collect baseball cards and jerseys and what have you. I collect hotel room keys. So I have a whole box of maybe over 3,000 room keys.
That is fascinating.
That I'm just trying to figure out how to turn it into an art piece someday.
Yeah. I'd imagine you've got like a pro packing system down, like
I do.
all of that.
I typically only travel with carry-ons.
Okay.
Even if I'm gone for 3 weeks or 3 days, it's still a carry-on. Mm-hmm. I've been gone for, my longest is 6 weeks all over Brazil during the 2014 World Cup.
Yeah.
In a carry-on.
Wow. Wow. Pro tip traveler right here. Like that's how you do it. I find it so interesting too, because you have been to so many, tentpole sporting events, and a part of them is their favorite.
Oh, goodness. I've worked with the NFL now for about 5 seasons, and every Super Bowl I feel like just keeps raising the bar.
Yeah.
I've also had the opportunity to work with the league on their Mexico and Brazil games. So again, going back to my international marketing experience and my love of travel, mm-hmm. those just really speak to me. World Cups, I've been to both men's and women's World Cup, but I particularly remember the one in Brazil because I was working for Pele at the time.
Right.
So to be with somebody who is such a global god and icon of the sport and being right next to him, experiencing and witnessing Brazil hosting the World Cup through his eyes was just fascinating.
I can't imagine what that must have been like, because he is such a, anyone who goes by one name, know that they have made it on a whole nother level, but especially in Brazil, what an icon there. What do you remember specifically about that experience? Or is there a story or an anecdote that you can share that kind of, adds some color to who you know Pele to be?
We grinded on the road. I mean, we were sometimes doing all 6 continents within a 3-4 month period.
Wow.
The only one we haven't been to is Antarctica.
Do we get an Antarctica all-star game going on?
I know, right?
Yeah.
But no, we were on the road and we had to have stamina. We had to have respect for each other. We had to have tons of patience and poise because you're dealing with the public constantly, knowing when to say no because mm-hmm. you're surrounded by fans and crowds and oftentimes mayhem, and learning and wanting to say yes for many times because for some of these people, it's their only chance ever to meet the king of football.
Yeah.
And to give people that core memory and once in a lifetime experience was important for us. So it was pretty incredible to be able to, learn and go at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And just keep the energy high that entire time, which I'm sure it's exhausting traveling that much and going through that grind.
It definitely can be.
But what a cool and unique experience.
Yeah.
Another aspect about, what you do that I find really interesting is, the way that you decide how to represent a person and the way that you can kind of highlight and zero in on somebody's best, and their most powerful attributes. Mm-hmm. Is that a skill that you've acquired? Is that something that you've found innate in yourself? And how do you look at a person or an athlete or a brand and say, this is your headline? How does that kind of come together?
It's funny you say that because sometimes I see the headline before I see the story.
Okay.
That comes with years and years and years of experience and kind of knowing how to creatively package storytelling at the intersection of like communications and culture through the lens of sports. And all of that has to come together in this perfect alchemy to create a narrative for your client that will resonate with press and social media. And you're constantly coming up with creative angles, and you have to be really good storyteller. You have to have really good relationships and know when to lean on those relationships to get your stories across. You have to be on trend and on point with what's happening in the news so that you never, ever appear tone deaf, right? With what you're working on and what you're pitching. And then it's not just paying attention to what's happening in sports, but what's happening in fashion, in entertainment, in internationally, in travel, in tech, in business, and kind of see where whatever it is you're working on, whether it's a brand, whether it's an individual, whether it's an event or an initiative, where does that fit into the overall scheme of the news cycle? In the overall scheme of trends and overall scheme of just what the public is engaging with at the time.
Yeah.
It's constant.
Yeah. And it's like you have to keep a constant pulse on the zeitgeist while also being traveling all over the world. When do you find time for Theresa?
I'm pretty good at finding moments for myself.
Yeah.
And it can come in a lot of different ways. It can be, if I'm traveling on the road for a long time, maybe I'll ask a friend or a family member to fly there and meet me. And we'll just take a couple days downtime after the project's done to explore a city. It could be something like that. It could be just a day of sleeping in and meditation and self-care. It could be a really good workout at the gym and just sweating out all the stress and toxins. It could be a really nice meal, and a glass of wine. It could honestly be a lot of things as long as it brings me joy and allows me to then reset and take on the next challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's like you got to find those moments where you can find them, and they kind of pop up all over the place, I'd imagine.
Yeah. And it's hard to plan. Friends that know me well enough where, there's always these impromptu adventures that Theresa proposes. And sometimes I'll just send a friend a text to say, what are you doing next week? And she's like, where am I packing my bags for?
Traveling? Where are we going? Yeah. But that's great. And
but it's important.
A support system and a community around you that leans into that is so priceless, I'm sure.
And I just love that also the public acceptance of mental health care is so much more prioritized now. So it's okay to say when you're not okay. And it's okay to ask for a pause or a moment to just have downtime or to reflect. And it's normalized now, and as women in the industry for a long time, we felt like we had to shut off feelings and emotion and softness to be able to survive in this industry.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's okay to be authentically yourself now.
Yeah. And authenticity is such a key too. I think that's something that shines so bright when people can be authentically and genuinely themselves, whether they are at their, highest high or at maybe a low or an off day, and balancing that. And I'm sure that, you probably encourage your clients and all that to kind of lean into the authenticity of the moment rather than the performative aspect of things.
Right. And also going back to my clients, I feel like I've had this true blessing and honor to work with clients who equally want to create impact in the world. And we work on really meaningful things together, whether it's to address unspoken narratives or underserved communities, or we see kind of this opportunity that we can really come in and make a difference. Like, those are the conversations that I have daily with my clients. We're innovating, we're creating bold new, paths and avenues for our consumers. We are changing perceptions as we go of things. And I just feel like all that work is just so important because you see your work making a difference.
Yeah.
And I like to be behind the scenes. And so I'm always so proud when I get to read a headline of a client that's very positive, or I can see children's faces lighting up because of something we did, or that I can see the social media chatter being through the roof, amazing, kind of like this viral zeitgeist, like you say, because what we did really authentically resonated with our audience.
Yeah. What is something that you are passionately working on right now?
I'm working on a project which I started thinking about 3 to 5 years ago.
Okay.
And then 2 years ago, I said, okay, if you don't put it to paper, it's never going to happen. And it's this project called Starting Lineup. And the whole idea of Starting Lineup is preparing young women to take the field in sports marketing and media. And a lot of it came from the fact that when I was early on in my career, I didn't really have many people that looked like me, and I didn't really know where to go for mentorship. I didn't really know how to handle certain situations. And it took me 28 years of my career now to realize that this is needed. And I don't want the next generation to have to spend 28 years figuring it out. And so Starting Lineup happens end of July, and I'm going to host about 10 young women around 17 to 23. And they're going to come to New York, and they're going to spend 5 days with me. And in those 5 days, I will give you the most accelerated access and path and exposure into this industry. And this is because of all the people that I've worked with and have built in my network over the years. So we'll do a lunch and learns with agency and brand executives. We might do a market travel and go through the city and maybe do trends research with a really cool footwear designer. They might be able to sit down and talk to content creators about how they created a career through social media. I might take them to a Giants training camp experience. Just different things like that show them different avenues in this industry through the lens of marketing and media, which allow them to feel like there's a place for them in this industry.
That is such an incredible experience that you are offering. And I'd imagine there are many more than 10 women that are like pining for that opportunity.
I wanted the first one.
How do you choose? How do you pare it down?
No, I wanted the first one to be very just curated, because I want the first one to be my proof of concept.
Yeah.
By the way, we're calling you. We're going to come visit you.
Happy
and sit
to
down
help.
with you.
Anything you need. Yeah.
So consider this your invite. But of those 10 women, they have come through multiple avenues. One comes through a recommendation. She goes to UCLA and wants to spend the summer with me in New York. 2 are coming from Mexico City, 1 from Hawaii, 2 from Oregon. I don't have anybody from New York yet. I need some New York girls.
That's incredible. Well, I am sure that they will be clamoring for this opportunity as the word continues to get out, because that is such a brilliant and unique experience, and what a leg up to, the next generation. It is so fascinating the way you put it. It's like, hey, it took me 28 years to learn some of these things. I want to give the next generation a bit of a head start. Is there somebody who gave you that mentorship, or is that what made that such an important aspect for you?
I've had so many different, I haven't had one mentor all the way through as much as people who have created sort of an impact on me, whether they realized it or not. I think the one voice I constantly have in my head is always of my parents, because it's like, we're an immigrant family, make your family proud and go out there and show the world what you can do.
Yeah.
So that's always been that voice in my head. But career-wise, I've had some incredible mentors that have put me in rooms or mentioned my name when I wasn't in those rooms. I remember particularly the president of Jordan Brand at the time, Larry Miller, always just a great, insightful leader and just a mentor that always was willing and open to help and listen at the same time. And he led with empathy, which I really loved. There's some incredible clients that I've worked with over the years, from athletes to executives, and they've also left a great imprint on me. But I just think about people that have really made a difference for me, and I keep them close so that when I do things like starting lineup, I can engage them again to show them that this is what you did for me, and now this is what I want to do for these girls.
Yeah. And that is, and you mentioned the importance of relationships in that regard too, and keeping them close. That's something I think some people are innately talented at, and some people have to work a little bit harder at, emphasizing the importance of maintaining relationships. What's the key for you to kind of keeping in touch over long periods of time?
Again, just adding value and not always reaching out when you need something. That's really important. And I'm sure you have experienced the same, but, those random acts of kindness also go a long way. So it's just reaching out on birthdays and anniversaries and graduations and weddings and bar mitzvahs and all sorts of things that are important to a person's life beyond their work, right? So that's sort of like connecting with them as people, not as potential clients or not as executives or entrepreneurs. So that's one. Secondly is, again, just adding value however you can, because the little things add up. And then be a resource, always reach out and say, how can I help you? What do you need? I noticed X, Y, and Z. I'm here as a resource in any way. And just that gesture, that simple gesture, means a lot. And a lot of them actually do end up calling when they need something. Yeah. And I like that. Yeah. I want them to be able to feel like it's an ongoing two-way relationship.
Absolutely. Because I think as much as, we like when people help us out, I think any of us in the world are honored when somebody asks us for a favor that we can help with as well.
And Theresa, they also say your network is your net worth. So, you keep that in mind as well, and how to leverage it in a business setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a fascinating, approach and angle. And I loved your career arc and your story and how you took, a non-traditional path to get to where you are. And it just kind of shows there's so many ways to get from A to B. And there's so many ways to achieve your goals and, achieve the goals that sometimes maybe you don't quite know are your goals at the outset of it. Is there a piece of advice that you would leave with, the younger generation watching or listening to the podcast that, might say, hey, I want to pursue a path similar to Theresa's?
Oh, gosh. The advice that sticks to me constantly, and I think it's because I come from a world of communications where it's nonstop. I always say, try to be as proactive as possible so that you can be reactive in the most informed way. And a lot of us don't do the preparation. A lot of us would rather react in the moment. And then some of us like to prepare, but sometimes you over prepare that you don't think about the actual reaction. And I try to bring those two worlds together. And I feel like in communications, it's helped me solve a lot of problems, think quick on my feet, and allow me to make decisions, own those decisions, and follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. And
you have to almost anticipate.
Yeah.
I don't want to say hope for the best, prepare for the worst, but it's almost like you have to anticipate and visualize all sorts of scenarios so that by the time A, B, or C, or D happens, you already have some level of preparation internally to be able to react in the right way.
And that preparation kind of breeds that confidence because you know that you're able to do it. The decisiveness is something that is a skill that I admire and all that. And it's important as well. And kind of reminds me of what my dad always used to say. He'd say, over prepare and then wing it. And sometimes, if you've got that preparation in your pocket, like you were saying, it takes you far. Theresa Tran, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. This has been another episode of Her Playbook. The Her Playbook podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop jewelry styles designed for every day and every occasion at your local Kendra Scott store or at kendrascott.com.